he defines himself as an expert in the creation and maintenance of public myths or public presumptions. His special interest is in what he calls searing or molding events that take on transcendent importance, carving into the memory of future generations. Okay? Now, in November, December 1998, 3 years before 9/11, he co-authors an article with the former head of the CIA entitled Catastrophic Terrorism. They speculate about the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center and says that if it would have succeeded, the results would have been undescribable. I'll quote something he writes from that article. Such an act of catastrophic terrorism would be a watershed event in American history. Like Pearl Harbor, the event would divide our past and future into before and after. The United States might respond with draconian measures, scaling back civil liberties, allowing wider surveillance of citizens, detention of suspects, and use of deadly force, unquote. That's 3 years before 9/11. Bingo. 1, 9/11. 2, the Draconian Patriot Act to scale back civil liberties. 3, unlimited surveillance of citizens, which we get through the NSA, National Security Agency, and the program they use is called Echelon. How many of you have heard of the program Echelon? Well, a lot of you. Oh, wow. Okay. And 4, detention of suspects like in Guantanamo Bay, right? And 5, deadly force, Iraq, Afghanistan, immediately. 5 out of 5 home runs straight. Is that coincidence? Do we have any hint of what it might be? Is it his expertise at work? And we don't know, so let's take a look. There might be some evidence that shows that. Well, if we recall, for example, the 9/11 families, it took them over a full year to get the Bush administration dragging their feet into creating some sort of a commission, right? And but it wasn't a genuine CSI, crime scene investigation. No forensic evidence was used, just a bunch of hand-picked friends of George Bush. And recently, I'm going to test you on this, the two chairmen, Hamilton, Lee Hamilton and King, they said in an article they wrote that the committee was set up to fail. How so? How many of you have heard that it was set up to fail, 9/11 Commission? Some of you have heard that, okay. Well, how so? Well, it turns out that the final report of the commission was written just as they were starting to call witnesses before the committee. What kind of investigation is it when the conclusion is written ahead of time? You can answer that. And guess who wrote the final report ahead of time? Mr. Zelikow. And he was the hand-picked executive director. He controlled every small aspect of the whole thing, who did what and how they did it and when they did it. This wasn't headline news. This should have been headlines news if Chief Justice Black would have had his way in talking about a free press. Since 9/11, we've had all these terrorist scares, what critics now call false flag operations. I'm going to mention just a few of them. In 2006, Toledo, Ohio was going to be attacked. Any of you remember that, Toledo, Ohio? Then there was going to be, planes were going to hit LA skyscrapers. And then in 2006 again, the 17 young Muslims in Toronto were arrested under spectacular charges. They were going to bomb several locations, including the CN Tower. Then they're going to go on to the Parliament and bomb the Parliament buildings, and then on to behead Prime Minister Harper. You know, just outrageous stuff. And you know, when you read stuff like that, it kind of reminds you of the baby with wings on the end of the bayonet, right? It's just so out there, on to behead the Prime Minister. But the problem is, it was successful. Because what happened after that? Because of these terror scares, the Anti-Terrorist Act was passed. So now we have in Canada the equivalent of the Patriot Act in the U.S. We're all ready for martial law. A couple more examples. Lower Manhattan was going to be attacked again. Then there was the rice and poison scare in the UK. And then they were going to hit the Sears Tower in Chicago. Are any of you remembering these? Some of them come up? Okay. Then 10 planes, the recent one, 10 planes are heading from the UK to the US, and they're all going to be exploded at the same time. Okay, so anyway, the point of it is monthly, almost monthly, there's a new terrorist scare, and it makes you wonder if they're tugging at the strings of what Trotter, I started talking about earlier, Trotter's irrational herd instinct. Are they trying to keep us in a constant state of alarm, basically, scaring us into sacrificing our liberties for security? Next picture. Okay, PR experts appeal to the emotional center and the limbic system. I mentioned it earlier. That's that on the left section there, that's that kind of white spot just above where the brainstem goes up. That white area kind of in the middle, not the green area. The green area is the prefrontal cortex. That's where we do all our learning and rational thinking. But if they can keep us down in the limbic system, then that's a good place to maintain power. Since education, helps us develop critical thinking, that's what gives us, the public, a fighting chance. So by maintaining a political atmosphere of fear and intimidation, it helps keep us in the lower brain centers, keeps us away from critical analysis. So the upshot then is we have to calm down our emotions before we can access the green part, the prefrontal cortex. That is a picture of Earth. That little blue dot in the middle, taken 3.7 billion miles away by Voyager 1 in 1990. And we live on a little tiny speck in the cosmos, basically. That's 5.5 hours, light hours away from us. That means in a light year, you wouldn't even be able to see us. And you know how many millions of light years across the cosmos. So we live on this little speck. And scientists say that we're the only life form that can control its own future. Yet we're spoiling the ecosystems, at an unprecedented rate, as most of you already know. And mind control and war is pushing us to the brink. So we can do something about this. Let's encapsulate kind of what we've looked at for this evening. Several leading books on public relations memorialize how the determined few must use media mind control tactics, such as the covert war on truth, to maintain their rule over the masses. The media war on truth, then, is a necessary component of engineering consent. Thomas Jefferson, some of you may know, spoke of informed consent as the cornerstone of democracy. I reason misinformed consent as manufactured consent befits aristocracy. In other words, informed consent is to democracy what engineered consent is to aristocracy. Edward Bernays and other public relations specialists and media moguls have worked very hard to superimpose engineered consent upon informed consent. Aristocracy upon democracy by deceit. Did you know that 85% of the public gets approximately 85% of their picture of reality from television news? If they're controlling media news, controlling consent of the people, is this democracy? How can we survive if we are systematically lied to day in and day out, year after year? Living in a world of mass deception, it reduces our ability to find healthy solutions to our collective problems. Since John Rendon, who I mentioned just briefly earlier, is a high-paid disinformation warrior, isn't the world ready for a few truth warriors? A few deception detectives? We're going to give you a chance to find that out.